That's right. The Survivor Worldwide crew is back. We're here with our last pre-season content, I guess, before we actually see a live season of Survivor South Africa Immunity Island coming up. And we're going to be talking about a few things in regards to Survivor South Africa Immunity Island. And we're going to touch on a few sort of topics and predict a few things in regards to how we think the season will go prior to seeing it. It's at the time of recording, Riley, it's exactly 1 week to go before we see Survivor South Africa. How excited are you?
So bloody excited. It's been so long since we've had Survivor actually on our screens. Well over a year and a half now. So just to be watching a new season of Survivor and not rewatching Islanders Secrets or whatever else, as great as they are, to see some new content, to meet some new characters is going to be really exciting.
Now, Riley, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Do you like the odd beverage here and there? I feel like we need to crack like a beer or something when we do our first one just to sort of celebrate.
Absolutely. Well, I got a gin and tonic here at the moment. But other than that, yeah, no, definitely have to crack a beer for a year and a half without Survivor and returning. And it's great that Survivor South Africa is going to be the first one to bring it back. And I really hope that people can tune into this podcast and learn more about Survivor South Africa and really get involved, because I think Survivor South Africa is really underrated in terms of international Survivor seasons. It's so great. There's always great characters, and I really, really hope that this will be the same as well this season.
Yeah, okay, well, let's start off with that topic, specifically talking about Survivor South Africa, and let's actually start with point 2 that I wrote down for us here, because it's kind of relevant. The camera, the crew, and the staff of Survivor South Africa. You mentioned that it's a season or a franchise that you enjoy a lot. I'm the same. I really enjoy Survivor South Africa. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I'm from South Africa as well, but it's good to hear when an Australian say that they really enjoy it, and that they potentially enjoy it even more than their own franchise, which is high praise, because I actually do like Australian Survivor a lot as well. When you look at this crew, they've got a very experienced hands there. You've got someone like Leroux Botha, who's extremely accessible to the Survivor community. He does a lot of podcasts with different people. Like the most recent one that he did was with Shannon, I believe, in December last year, to talk about this season when they just finished filming it. And you can tell that he's someone that's extremely passionate about the franchise, and someone that has, as a fan from day one, he's kind of in touch. Like, I feel like in recent years, Survivor US has really gotten out of touch with what the diehard fan community wants. But Leroux Botha seems to be someone that's very in touch with that. Like he said that he would never do a redemption or an exile island type of thing where people come back, the edge of extinction, for instance. He doesn't like that himself. So and he just really gives you that feel of the old school type of Survivor, like a lot of character building, a lot of seeing how votes are built together from the outset to oust somebody. Bringing back some of the favorite stuff that we see in Survivor, like auctions and things like that have disappeared in the recent season. So he's still very much a throwback when he does these shows to what we used to see. One of the things that I'm really interested in, Riley, is how will this whole thing affect the cameramen, the crew, the people that are in the production team, when it comes to actually doing this season locally? Because, normally we know that for a lot of the Survivor crews, they are international and they fly people in from different places to shoot the show. How do you think this will affect the production quality and the overall value of seeing this production in South Africa and potentially having to deal with a new squad?
It doesn't seem to be too much of a tough ask, I don't think. I would imagine that the production company would have experience, working on other shows together before. I believe it's the same production company that does The Bachelor in South Africa as well. So, I don't think it should be too difficult. And having someone like Leroux Botha on there as well, who's really innovative, really switched on. He knows what he's doing when it comes to filming Survivor season. It's been around for so long. I do think they'll do a good job here. And I mean, just from the early indications, looking at the cast as well, it does seem really promising. I mean, Survivor South Africa have done a lot to really get this season on the ground. What with finding a location in the midst of COVID, and South Africa haven't exactly avoided the virus either. They've been very hard hit by it. So to see production work a way around that and get in before Australian Survivor and US Survivor, I really do have high hopes for this season. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether things change, although I don't really think things will change too much. I think I don't think we'll notice too much of a difference, really, although I do wonder what measures were taken prior to the season to ensure everyone's safety and during the season as well. But I certainly don't think Survivor South Africa will take a hit, much like looking at Big Brother Canada recently, or the Challenge even, seasons like that have proven that you can still film a really high quality season even in these trying times.
Yeah, so you brought up a lot of things there, and from having listened to Leroux Bota's podcast that he did with Shannon and Mike Bloom, he mentioned that they had like an onion layered, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, guys, but you're definitely going to listen to that podcast as well if you want to know a little bit more about Leroux Bota and how he did this season. But he mentioned there was like an onion layer bubble that they had, and that people in the inside layer who would have contact with the players directly would have different high-vis on to the people that were in the outer layer, and then that they would, like the outer layer would never get in contact with someone in the inner layer. And obviously they had some sort of a method there, and there was a potential of them talking to other franchises like Australian Survivor, from what I understand, to talk about how they did it and potentially share those ideas, because they were the first franchise to actually do this. Obviously they had a lot of experience in how to do it. But here's the thing, Riley, that for me was the most interesting from that interview is he said that 2 days after they did the final tribal council, there was a massive outbreak in the Wild Coast in South Africa, and it shut everything down. So they luckily, by the grace of the Survivor gods, finished the season just in time, so we actually had a season to watch.
Yeah, that's crazy to hear. And yeah, just so lucky to be able to film and really have nothing go wrong as far as we know. But yeah, to really be innovative in that sense, and what you said, the onion layers, they're really interesting to see how they're sort of interacting, and I suppose it does make sense. And this is a big worry for me with US Survivor filming at the moment, is having so many cast and crew coming from around the world, and being in a small community like that, which might be susceptible to the virus and not have as good medical facilities as they would have in the US or Australia or something like that. You really do need to be safe and responsible with this. It's good that we haven't heard too many horror stories from Survivor South Africa production now, and I really hope they weren't. But it is going to be really interesting to see whether the show is affected by this. But I think it'll be really interesting to see everyone run around, and I suppose strange for everyone. With this last year and a half, seeing people without masks interacting with each other will just be so bizarre to watch and really interesting, I think.
Yeah, especially in South Africa, where they were sort of forced to wear masks quite early on to protect themselves and others around them in the community. One of the things that for me with the camera crew and staff, while we're still sort of working around that specific talking point in the production team, that I was quite interested in was, how many camera people did they? Because when I spoke to Jark, he mentioned there were people with jackets on that had Heroes versus Villains crew and all these different, they were like alumni that have worked with the production crew for such a long time over the years. For all we know, that could have been an Australian crew member or a US crew member, you know what I mean? So that's where it's going to be interesting. They're going to have to tap into some of the local talent, potentially work with a few people there that haven't done a show like this before. But I also know that South Africa is a country full of talent, and there is a lot of people that would potentially be able to come in there. And I've got no doubt that the production crew, like you mentioned, they do other shows in South Africa. I believe it's called Afrikaans, and please don't at me if I'm wrong with that, but I believe that's what it is. And they do like The Bachelor and all these kind of different shows. So I think it'll be interesting. Now, another thing that also came up in that interview was Leroux Bota said because they were local, he actually found it easier in regards to having access to like building material and things like that for challenges, and understanding the local currency, understanding how to get certain supplies for challenges and things like that. He said there was certain positives to doing this in your backyard of your own country to be able to shoot it. So he mentioned that the challenges would be bigger and more challenging than any other Survivor season that we've seen so far. So it'll be interesting to see what type of creative ideas they can come up with, because whenever we look at these franchises, we always look at the Australian Survivor season as being the cream of the crop and sort of the benchmark for challenges. So it'll be interesting to see, Riley, can they up the ante? And they've got a younger crew here, or younger cast here, who definitely physically should be able to do more than any of the previous seasons that we've seen in Survivor South Africa.
Yeah, I do love the physical challenges in Australian Survivor. So yeah, to see them potentially bring that over to Survivor South Africa would be great. Sometimes watching Australian Survivor can be a little bit too brutal, but I certainly think these guys are getting a red hot crack. And just to see, what sort of challenges they adapt, I do hope and I trust that seeing what Survivor South Africa production have done in the past. I do think they can do a good job at being innovative, not only in challenges but also in twists. It's something that we saw obviously come up in Winners at War with Adam Klein trying to pry that fleur-de-lis off the podium, thinking it was an idol.
Yeah.
Turned out it wasn't, but it's something we have seen in Survivor South Africa before, something they've introduced in the past. To see that sort of innovation from the Survivor South Africa crew, and also, in terms of challenges as well, I'm really looking forward to seeing, just what different things they do. Because obviously it's been a long time off the air as well. I mean, Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets, that would have filmed in
2 years
early
ago.
2019, late 2018. Yeah. So it's been a long time since they last filmed. So certainly to see what they've been thinking of in the last 2 years in terms of new twists and new challenges and all different sorts of things. It'll be really exciting to see just how innovative they are this season.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the location, the Wild Coast. The season was shot over in South Africa. It's the Eastern Cape in South Africa. The first time I looked at the Wild Coast, I was kind of, and this will give you a real idea of how I don't know that area, because in the Eastern Cape, I've been to certain areas, like I've been to East London and I've been to like KwaZulu-Natal, Durban area, but this is kind of like somewhere in the middle between those two areas that I've been to before. This area is going to be quite interesting. It's going to have its own challenges. So the time of the year that they shot this, Riley, it was around, I believe, December, end of November, December, that time of the year. It is normally sort of towards the summertime, and the climate in the Eastern Cape, normally it's quite humid. It is kind of tropical to some degree. So you might think that they're in any other island sort of shooting this. I don't think you're going to notice that this was done in South Africa opposed to it could have been somewhere like Thailand or something else, and you wouldn't have even known if you didn't know Wild Coast was in South Africa. One of the things that'll be interesting for me here, specifically, Riley, is that there's going to be summer rain. There's going to be thunderstorms. There's not going to be as much rain as you see in the islands. I think Samoa, it rained consistently, but there will be massive downpours. And I can tell you, when that type of rain falls in the East Cape, it's like someone taking a bucket of water and just dipping it on you. It's not drops. It's like solid bits of water falling down with thunderstorms and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see how the cast adapts to that type of weather while they're out there. And then probably the more interesting thing for me, and the thing that I'll be honest with you would have scared me going out there and playing this season in the Wild Coast, is that there's a lot of wildlife there. Like the name says, the Wild Coast. They won't be able to do challenges in the beach because the beach has got great white sharks. It's full of wildlife in the beach there. But more so for me, the real thing that would have scared me is the amount of snakes that you get there. Like, I mean, we're talking about some of the most poisonous snakes you get in Africa, like the black mamba, the green mamba, the boomslang, which is it's like a tree snake. It's the most poisonous one in Africa. The Cape Cobra and the puff adder. The puff adder is known for killing quite a few people because people don't see it. It's quite a lazy snake, so you can easily step on it. So looking for idols and things like that, putting your hand beneath a rock or something like that, it's going to be interesting. Apparently they had to employ a full-time snake like handler or wrangler to be out there when they were out there to try and keep the contestants as safe as possible.
That's crazy. But yeah, it will be interesting to see just how they adapt to the location. But obviously Survivor, the core of it has always been going to a new environment and adjusting to the elements and really testing yourself. And that's something we haven't seen too much of late in terms of, watching constant seasons in, whether it be Samoa or Fiji or Nicaragua. So to see that different environment, I'm really excited to see that. And see, so certainly to see how they get around water challenges. I'm assuming there's some sort of lake nearby. It will be really, really exciting to see,
so they'll be doing it in
location.
Just to answer that question, they'll be doing those challenges in the rivers. So there's no like real lake like you would see in the Australian season coming up, but it'll be interesting to see what type of river, because you've got massive rivers. Like there's a river around the Wild Coast, one of the biggest rivers I think in the world, that goes straight into the ocean. So a massive river that they probably will do some of their challenges around, and it'll be interesting to see like how they creatively do, because obviously with rivers, you've got currents and things like that. You've seen Australian Survivor use the current as part of a challenge in the past, which I actually thought that was one of the most interesting challenges they've had. But it will be interesting to see, because you won't get clear water shots, because the water in those rivers in South Africa, they're quite muddy. So they're not going to have cameras in the bottom showing you someone get something and things like that. So how do they adapt to that? It's going to be the question.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, what sort of challenges they do. As you mentioned there, if they're using the river, it'll be really interesting to see what they do there. It does remind me almost of a season like Guatemala, maybe less warm, but where you can't go in the water too much. It'll be interesting to see just how they adapt that. And being in a local environment, I was looking through the cast, and I don't think there's anyone from that area. I believe Anela is someone who's from Durban, which is obviously just a little bit away, just up the coast there in KwaZulu-Natal. But it's also something I'm really excited to see is the fact we're no longer on the Pacific Ocean. It's been a really long time, at least in terms of US Survivor, where we've always been on the Pacific Ocean. Survivor South Africa, Philippines recently in the South China Sea there. But the Indian Ocean, we haven't really seen any sort of season in this area of the world. I mean, we've had Survivor Africa in Kenya, but that's, a lot further north up the coast, and inland as well. So, to see really a different environment here. And, the Indian Ocean would be, interesting to see just how different it is to the Pacific.
And I'd be really surprised if we don't see someone like Jason, who's in this season, go out there and try and fish, for instance. Like, yes, they might not do challenges in the water because the currents are that strong and there's a lot of wildlife there. But I'm pretty sure when Leroux Botha had a podcast, he said that they would still be able to go in and fish there, because there would be a lot of fish and things like that in those oceans. Like, if you get the right gear, you could eat pretty well if you've got someone that knows what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. One of the interesting things about the location, just before we move on as well, is that Leroux Botha mentioned that they had to get special permission from the actual owners of the Survivor franchise. I believe it's the guy who owns the whole franchise. It's obviously not Mark Burnett. He had to give special permission for them to shoot this one inside of South Africa, because the actual format, and it's part of the Survivor Bible that the producers get whenever they do these shows, state that you cannot have the show in your own country. So obviously we've been giving the US a lot of crap for not doing it in their own country, and just so that we can get proper 39 days and can get 2 seasons a year out and all that kind of stuff. But clearly there was some hoops for them to jump through, and the US Survivor is also the flagship of the franchise, so maybe there was a little bit more difficulty in getting permission to do that actually in your own country. I don't know, I'm just sort of putting that out there. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about here, Riley, is the Immunity Island as a theme coming into this season. So for us as fans, like if it was any other producer that was behind this, I would be super scared of hearing the word immunity and island together, because, we look at where Survivor has gone in recent years, and it is just advantage heavy, idol heavy. There's always, me and you've come on this podcast and we've said this throughout the whole Island of Secrets, like we don't want too many advantages and immunities towards the end of the game. I'm really interested in your thoughts. What do you think they're going to do in this season, and how do you think the Immunity Island will play into the season going forward? And obviously this is just speculation at this point. We don't know, but this is kind of fun to speculate about for the next week until we actually see it play out.
It's funny how Survivor South Africa are doing yet another island twist, while the US, who are really notorious for doing this thing, are allegedly they're ditching themes altogether. So I do find it interesting, and also to see how that affects future seasons of Australian Survivor and Survivor South Africa if they do the same sort of thing. But I'm really hopeful of this twist, actually. I hope it's not something like Ghost Island, but that was my concern going into Island of Secrets. Going into Island of Secrets, I thought this is going to be, Ghost Island 2.0, and it's going to be absolutely terrible, but they really did some great things with it. I think if it is that sort of Exile Island vibe again, Survivor South Africa really have a very story-driven focus in terms of the narrative, whereas I think US Survivor is always very strategy driven. So I think that to see these players suffering on Exile, or Immunity Island in this case, on their own, that's going to be something I'm really interested to see. Because certainly last season on Island of Secrets, they did a great job with it. I would be very doubtful if they just had, an idol every time you went to Immunity Island. I do think there'll be something similar to Island of Secrets where there's all different types of advantages on that island there, whether that be an idol or something like safety without power or skipping a tribal council. You mentioned a great idea for a twist last week in saying that, perhaps you could choose someone to mutiny with, and you can, choose who goes to what tribe. Different twists like that. And I think Survivor South Africa in the past, they really have proven that they can be very innovative. In fact, I think over the last couple of years since Philippines went to air, Survivor South Africa have been very innovative in their twists. Seeing something like what happened in the Philippines where Palesa found that idol off the podium there, and putting these idols under urns or wherever else, creating all these different twists like with Tanya on Island of Secrets, getting to skip the swap and pick her tribe essentially. I'm really hopeful that LaRue, Bota, and the rest of the production crew can create some entertaining twists, and I do think they will. I mean, we have seen a lot of very good twists in the past that, hopefully the US Survivor and other versions of the show can adapt in the future. And I do think it'll be a much broader spectrum of advantages than just immunity idols. And sometimes it might not even be advantages. There might just be a moral dilemma. Do you want to pick the firewood or the jar of lollies like Jeffrey had to do there? So I think there are a lot of different things that you can do with a twist like Immunity Island that don't necessarily rely on immunity idols.
Yeah, I just feel like when you name the season Immunity Island and the word immunity is in that name, you kind of expect some sort of an immunity to come along with being on the island of immunity. You know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting to see how they play around that. I'm hoping you're right in the sense that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have immunity every single time that you're sent there. And hopefully they are very creative in what they do there. LaRue Butz, I did mention when he spoke to Shannon after the season that we will see players make a lot more choices this season compared to the Island of Secrets. They learned a lot, he said, from Island of Secrets in regards to what they felt worked well and what didn't work well. So I'm all for the fact that maybe you need to make a decision of mutiny. You can pull someone with you, or you maybe decide that you want to pull someone else with you to the Immunity Island so they're safe for the night if you're both in the minority in your tribe. Let's try different things out there and keep it fresh. I'm not too worried about the theme as a whole because it is the South African production team who's got a hold of it. One of the things that's going to be interesting for me would be to see if we're actually going to find idol nullifiers this season, because I noticed that in the preseason interviews with Shannon and Mike, a lot of the players said that their favorite advantage is the idol nullifier coming into this thing. And the idol nullifier is such a contentious thing out there in the fandom. There's a lot of fans who do not like the idol nullifier. They reckon it's overpowered. I think me and you've spoken about that here before, Riley, where we said as long as it's not being used as late as the one that Dean used to get Janet out in the Island of Idols, we're okay with it. Like, I actually think the idol nullifier takes a hell of a lot of skill if you are forced to play it earlier in the game, because you still need to know who's going to play the idol. So you still need to really have a lot of social capital in regards to finding out the right amounts of information to play the idol nullifier successfully. What's your thoughts on the idol nullifier potentially making an appearance here in South Africa, and what other sort of advantages or twists would you like to see this season?
Yeah, I'd like to see the idol nullifier. It kind of reminds me what Parvati did in Heroes vs. Villains there with the JT elimination. It really does take a lot of layers of thinking to figure out who has the idol, who's going to play the idol, who is going to have the idol played on them. You know, who's immune, who's not. What's the best option there? So I wouldn't mind seeing that. I do hope that it's not too idol heavy like what we saw in the end game of Island of Secrets, where everyone had idols at the final 5 there with Steffi, except for Steffi, of course. One twist I brought up in the past over on my channel, just to negate the idol nullifier, is something like maybe a super hidden immunity idol, something that can negate the power of the idol nullifier, because I know that's the idol nullifier is very unpopular in terms of, what happened with Janet was devastating, as well as what happened with Dan, but more so Janet. I think people were a lot more upset with how her game came crumbling down there, just because someone else had an idol that essentially negated hers. It's something I think would need a little bit of tweaking. But certainly, if there was one magical hidden immunity idol out there that could only be played once in the game that negated any idol nullifier, something like that, I do think, thinking about different locations to hide idols, all those sorts of things, maybe some new advantages when it comes to the vote. Maybe there's a twist where you can all of a sudden create a tribe swap at whatever point in the game. I think there's lots of different things to think about. There are lots of things to think about. I don't think something like that would happen because it would obviously put too much power in the players' hands.
That'd be so cool, though.
it would be cool to see someone like Jark on Island of Secrets when he's feeling on the outs. Maybe after that Ting Ting vote, he says, "Oh shit, I'm in trouble now. What can I do? Let's call a tribe swap." I think it does. It gives more power to the players, but it does really change the game and make it that little bit more unpredictable, I suppose. Because when you have these tribe swaps every time, it seems almost repetitive. You know, it's going to be at 15 or 14 members. Exactly. You're either going to split into 3 or 2 tribes. To really think about what different things they can do there, I'd be really excited about. I'd even like something like a later merge, you know, maybe like a 10-person merge. It's something we haven't seen in a while. Just different variety that we haven't seen in other seasons. I do think that, Survivor South Africa are going to come up with different twists, different places to hide idols, all sorts of different advantages, all sorts of different challenges, I'm sure. I'm really hopeful that they deliver, and I'm not talking them up too much, but I guarantee you this is going to be a very exciting season. I mean, I don't care if it crashes and burns. I always say any season of Survivor is a great season of Survivor, even Redemption Island. I mean, there are great moments in every season, and it's just been so long, Chris, that I just really want to get more Survivor on my screen and just to watch new people play the game, new strategies, new advantages. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I can't add any more to the whole twists and themes thing. I think you kind of said it best, but let's talk about the thing that will make this season or break the season. And every season it comes down to the cast. There we have them. This is the 2 teams that we have selected. If you haven't seen the actual selection process and why we chose different players here, please go back and check that out in our draft pick for the season. I am very excited about the cast. And I even think, listening to all of the interviews that they did with Shannon and Mike before the season, I do think there's a few people that we slept on when we did our draft picks. My opinions on a few of the people that we've selected as well, Riley, has changed a bit, but luckily you don't have to go back. I know you haven't had time to go and listen to all of those. You don't have to do it because in a week's time, we'll see how right we are and how wrong we are about the players that we've selected. The key thing for me that stands out in this season is I do think that this might be the season with the most super fans or fans, whatever you want to call them, of the show that we've seen for a very long time in any iteration of the show. Talking about, there was people that I didn't even realize were fans that were fans of the show when I listened to the interview. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because there's a few players that aren't fans. And in my mind, like I said to you the other week, those that aren't fans are actually the biggest threats these days in the game. Those are the ones that seem to go quite deep, especially last season in Survivor South Africa. We had 5 people towards the end who weren't the biggest fans of the show that got very deep. But the fans of the show, the ones that are going to come in here and play, they're going to want to win the game. And a lot of them, I was surprised at how many of them said that they would rather go pre-merge than be a 0-vote finalist. So that to me tells me, that there are people here that are going to play the game very hard. Now, again, if I don't mention you in this very short sort of little bit that I'm going to go into here, this little monologue, please don't take offense to it because we really do not know who's going to do well this season or who's not going to do well. And the winner is sitting there on the side laughing about the fact that we chose them potentially in the last 4 spots. Who knows? But people that I feel even higher on coming into this now, Riley, is Renier. Someone that you gave a lot of grief to coming into my pick when I made him. And I tell you what, Renier, when he did his interview with Shannon and them, seemed a lot more calm because that was the one thing that I was a little bit worried about. When you looked at his video on the Mnet website, he seemed really tense and like very sort of, I don't know, he was like very intense to the point where I thought if that side of him comes through in the first day, people might think he's a little bit too intense and he's too much, like you said, a Jacob Durham type of player. But I do think he's going to be smarter than that. I've got a lot of faith in his ability to do well physically. And I think he's going to be a potential undercover great player here. I do think that he might be different to Jark. I thought he was going to be a Jark copy. He's going to be similar to Jark, a very big fan, but I think he's going to bring other elements to the game, especially from a physicality standpoint that's going to keep him there in the early game. Another person here that I'm extremely high on, and it's funny that they're sort of sitting in my mid team here, is going to be Sean. Again, I've got to back Sean because, we're both gamers and got to back other gamers. I hope that his KD coming into this season is 19-0, gets all 19 out and he gets the win. But Sean to me seems, like I said, kind of like a more, I kind of said he's like Shane Powers, but a grounded Shane Powers. I don't think he's got any of the craziness of Shane, to be honest with you. I think that he's going to be very experienced. He's got enough young person swag to fit in with the younger group as well. And potentially people might look at him for guidance. He might become an early leader. My fear for Sean is if he becomes an early leader, how is he going to do when he gets to the merge? But he's a big fan. He seems like someone that's extremely capable as well. And then for the rest of the tribe here, there is so many good players. Like on your team, Tyson, having listened to the interview, I feel like, yes, we said valid things in regards to him, in regards to coming into this game and maybe not knowing what he's getting himself into because he's not the biggest of fans. He has watched a few seasons, but he's coming in for the production side of it. But listening to his interview, he's been through some life stuff. He seems like he's actually got a pretty good head on his shoulders. He might be a sleeper for you and your team, someone that could do better than where we selected him in your group. And then the second person that I didn't rate high, that I need to put respect on his name, is Kieran. When you picked him that high, I thought that was kind of strange that you picked Kieran that high. But listening to Kieran talk in that interview, he seems as capable as Dino. It's just going to be interesting to see if him and Dino can work together because they kind of seem like the same player in some ways, which is something I think I mentioned quite early on. But overall, I'm really excited about this cast. I'm really excited because they seem to be gamers. Leroux Botha spoke highly of them afterwards, and he said that these guys are going to come to play from day one, and we will be getting a feast when it comes to this. I know we're putting this season on such a high pedestal here, Riley, but I'm really, really optimistic that this is going to be a good season.
Yeah, that's right. And there's other great cast members there that you didn't mention. Jason as well, someone I'm really looking forward to seeing. He says he's going to play a bit like Ozzy or Joe, but I do think he looks to be like more of a schemer, it seems. He's a big fan of the show as well, someone I'm looking forward to. Even Water, who I picked last, I'm really looking forward to seeing how she plays because she does seem to be very level-headed. One thing I don't like about this cast is just the fact that it's so young. It does remind me a lot of the Ghost Island cast, just in that, everyone's in that either early 20s to late 30s stage. Sean, being the oldest on this cast, is only 40 years old. It's something I always like seeing Survivor is older players like a Rudy or, a Jimmy Johnson or a Janet Carbon type in Island of the Idols there. I do like to see a little bit of diversity in terms of age, but it does seem like a really entertaining group. Lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, something really excited about. Everyone seems like they want to play. Chris, I'm still backing Dino to win. I still think I've got the better team, but we just got to wait another week and then we'll be able to see how it plays out. Really excited to see just how all these different players adapt and also interact with each other. That's one of the great
Should we
things
make it
about
fun?
Survivor. That's great thing about Survivor.
Right, let's make this fun. I want to stop you there because you said that you're very happy and confident about your team. So I'm assuming you think that you're going into the merge with more players than me. Like you're assuming like it's would you put a friendly wager on the fact that you think you've got more players there that'll make the merge?
I'm looking at it. I don't see any of my players going pre-merge, but I don't see any of yours going either. I'll tell you what, Chris. Next time I'm in Auckland, I'll buy you a beer. All right? If you have more members than me at the merge, I'll buy you a beer in Auckland. Otherwise, it'll be up
Yeah,
to you to buy me a beer.
I reckon we gotta put a beer on this, and we'll shout the other person if we're right. Because I feel even more confident about my team after listening to the interviews. So I feel it's going to be interesting to see who wins this thing. Obviously, it's very hard to predict the one person out of all 20 that is actually going to take this home. But I do feel like it's a strong team. I agree with you that Dino is the front runner. Based on everything we've seen so far, a lot of people are very high on him. But also, when you're that high, you can only go down.
That's right. And one thing we don't know yet about this season is what the tribe divisions are going to look like, and that is something that is really important on the season, is to see how different people interact. So maybe Dino might clash with someone on the tribe. I think someone like Anela might be someone that's going to be a very headstrong player. If he's on the same tribe as a Sean or a Chappies, how will they interact? Seeing all these different people interact. Again, people like Nicole or Carla, to see, if they're on the same tribe, will they clash or will they get along? That really is always a big test of character, I suppose, is finding your role in the tribe, and also, assimilating with others. It's you can't just come in and run the board. You really have to play to who you're playing against.
I've got a feeling like we're very high in Dino. All of us are very high in Dino, but I've got a feeling a woman is winning this one. I really, just for some other reason, I think it's a women's season. We haven't seen a woman won any of the Survivor South Africa seasons in a very long time. And after listening to the preseason sort of footage, there's going to be two women in my tribe that wouldn't potentially be the two women that you would have thought coming into this, because me and you haven't spoken about this since we did the draft, who I think is the front runners for potentially pulling out an upset and winning. And one of them is going to be Carla. I think I chose her very low, potentially a little bit too low. I feel like she very easily could get there on the back of bigger players than her and do a bit of a Natalie White at the end, or Kirsty Bennett. I think she's smart enough to sell herself to the jury at the end. She's a big enough fan. Another person that has impressed me on her interviews has been Kihan. Like, her interviews have been really good, and she's a bigger fan than what I thought of the show. She's gone to a couple of the South African reunion shows after those seasons. She may have bumped into a few of her other castmates at one of those reunion shows based on photos that I've seen preseason, but I won't go into that because I don't want to spoil anything. Like, I don't know placements, but I also don't want to spoil anything in regards to who on this cast might know each other. But I feel like three of them potentially may have run into each other prior to the season, just based on photos that I've seen on social media and some previous Survivor players. So it's going to be interesting to see if that dynamic sort of plays into there. The reason I still feel like my other women here are pretty strong as well. Santoni, for me, I really am still worried for her in this early game. I really am just worried that she's going to be seen as, if the challenges are harder and there's a lot of young people on this tribe, I'm just afraid that she's going to be seen as a liability in the challenges. But who knows? She could come in there and do excellent at puzzles. And we know that Survivor isn't just about the physicality, and that's the beauty of the game going into the season. And lastly, I just wanted to also say that Mike Laws, we didn't have any info on him prior to doing our draft the first time around. Listening to his interviews and sort of knowing the fact that he's gone back and watched a lot of the seasons, he was an early fan and then sort of started watching it again towards the later seasons. His favorite player is Zeke from Millennials versus Gen X. And he seems like a really intelligent guy as well. Like, he seems like he could be like another Dino or a Kieran undercover. The only thing with him is I feel like he's got the strategic chops and he understands that he can move people around to a certain degree, but will he be able to integrate as well with some of the jocks in the group like a Dino or Kieran would? That's my only question with him, but he potentially could be another sleeper there in your team as well. And obviously, like I said, if we haven't touched on you and you're somewhere in this cast, don't take offense to it, because you guys can tell us at the end of the season, you guys had it so wrong in the beginning. We've got very limited information to go off at the moment. And obviously we're going to make some brave calls when the season starts based on edit, based on what we're seeing. But under no means do we think that we'll have it right all the time.
Absolutely. Another player I just want to mention really quickly is Marisha as well. She looks like she'll be someone that will dominate in terms of challenges. Reminds me a little bit of Steffi from the previous season. She really looks to be a physical asset for her tribe. So to see how she goes I hope she does well for my sake, because there is a beer on the line. But I mean, either way, yeah, really looking forward to getting into this season. It's so close to the premiere that it's going to be really exciting just to be talking about some new Survivor and getting to know these new players.
Yeah, 100%. Now, guys, we will be doing this every weekend. This one is pre-recorded, but we should be doing it around the same time, which would be early morning time, like 2 a.m. in the morning in South Africa. It's going to probably suit, funny enough, Australian and New Zealanders and Americans a little bit better, but obviously you can watch the recorded show at a later stage. It will be ready for you every Saturday morning when you wake up if you wanted to watch it over the weekend. We will be going into the actual episodes, recapping it, and talking about what we thought of the episode, who we think the front runners are. We'll continue to look at our draft, and we will continue to put people into an elimination bracket. And like we said, there's a beer up for grabs here to see who gets the most people all the way through here to the merch, which I'm really excited about. If you like this content, guys, please hit subscribe. Put a like on the video, look out for this content, interact with us, and let us know what you think, by leaving a comment below to say, hey, Chris and Riley, these are the people that we think is our favorites going into the season, or this is where we think you're potentially wrong, or, we'd like to hear back from you. We want to engage with the community as much as possible. Riley, anything going on your channel at the moment? I saw that you had a Survivor Season 41, what we know so far, video that dropped, which was a pretty good one to see. And then I think there's another one. I haven't had time to see the latest one that you just dropped this week.
Yeah, so we've been talking a little bit about some of the news ahead of season 41 of US Survivor, of course. Also discussing why Survivor 39 days. There's plenty of content there. There'll be a Yul Kwon recap coming up in the next couple of days, how he won Survivor Cook Islands. You can obviously check that out over on Snuff. But other than that, Chris, I'm really excited. Survivor's back next week. Only 7 sleeps to go. I cannot wait, mate. It's going to be so much fun to dive in next week and dissect episode 1, and hopefully it's a good one.
Yeah, Yul Kwon, by the way, was the favorite player of quite a few people in this cast selection, which was quite surprising to see when they were doing the interviews. He's fresh in people's minds. So, yeah, great player. He was my favorite player in those first probably 20 seasons that I watched. I absolutely loved Yul. He's still in my top 5 right now. So looking forward to that video, and I will be looking out for it. So if you guys want to see that, go over to Riley's channel, Snubbed on YouTube, and you'll be able to see that video come out. That's really it from my end. Guys, it was great having you, and we will see you next week when we'll have the first episode of Survivor Immunity Island to talk about. Really excited.